Before I introduce Peter, como programa To Future y como codirector del programa del nuevo Magíster de Innovación, quiero agradecer a algunas personas e instituciones que han hecho posible este evento y esta organización. Agradecer a Romina Barrera y Pamela Silva de Emprendusé, a Pedro Parragués, Francisco Pizarro, Andrea Detmer, Trinidad Montalva, del equipo del Core Team del Magíster de Innovación, a la diseñadora Marta Barriga y Javiera Muñoz, al vicerrector Pato Donoso, Marco Singer, al director de Innovación Alfonso Cruz, vicerrector de Investigación Juan Larraín, y a la revista ¿Qué pasa?, que también nos está acompañando en este viaje de pensar el futuro de nuestro país y de nuestra región. So, now I'm going to introduce my former professor and mentor and colleague and now professor of this Innovation Master, Mr. Peter Gloor. Peter Gloor is a research scientist at the Center for Collective Intelligence at the MIT Sloan School of Management, where he leads a project exploring the fascinating world of the collaborative innovation networks, AKI, the COINs. He was Mercator Visiting Professor at the University of Colonia, and is a lecturer at Helsinki University of Technology, now the Aalto University. So we're already connected with your friends in Finland. Earlier, Peter was a senior research fellow at the Dartmouth TAC Center for Digital Strategies and an adjunct faculty in the Department of Computer Science at Dartmouth, where also, as many of you know, the artificial intelligence revolution started in Dartmouth in the 50s and in the 60s. And also a postdoctoral fellow at MIT. He received his PhD in computer science from the University of Zurich in 1989. We have heard his academic credential, but Peter has been also in the business world and in the entrepreneurship community. So he's equally home at these worlds. He's founder and chief creative officer, I like that title, it's a good one, chief creative officer of the software startup Galaxy Advisors. Until the end of 2002, Peter was a partner with Deloitte Consulting, leading its e-business practice for the whole continent of Europe. Before that, he was a partner with PricewaterhouseCoopers and the section leader for the software engineering at UBS, the Union Bank of Switzerland. His latest books are Swarm Creativity, Competitive Advantage through Collaborative Innovation Networks, Cool Hunting, Chasing Down the Next Big Thing, and Cool Farming, Turn Your Great Idea in the Next Big Thing, published by the Oxford University Press and by Amazon, and the stuff that you're also gonna learn just in a minute. He blogs about these issues in his blog Swarm Creativity. That could be something called like La Creatividad del Enjambre, could be a translation. And let me tell you that Peter, beyond this, he has been growing an amazing collaborative innovation and research network that I'm very honored to be part of, where he has been connecting researchers from all over the world, basically from Boston, from Helsinki, from Cologne, from Italy, and now from Chile, to really produce value using the new technologies that we have to read the collective mind. So now, without further ado, let's give a round of applause to Peter Gloor. His talk, his talk is called Predicting the Future Through Reading the Collective Mind. So it's pretty much connected to the Do Future talk. Welcome.
So what I would like to really talk about this evening is the surprising power of creative swarms. And enjambre, as I learned, or swarms, is very different from crowds. Crowds, that's huge masses of people, and usually they do not have much of a goal, but they are very good also in turning the wisdom of crowds into the madness of crowds. Swarms, that's very different. Swarms are creative, and I hope we will get a great swarm of creative entrepreneurs in this new master of innovation. Swarms have a goal and a vision. And what I would like to describe this evening is how you can read the collective mind of those creative swarms. That's something which I call cool hunting, and how you can help those members of those creative swarms to be more successful. And so the title of my talk, not outsourcing innovation, but crowdsourcing, and how can you leverage the crowds to become swarms. So the first thing that I would like to briefly address is how do we really read the collective mind, and predicting the future, reading the collective mind, that's something that mankind has been trying to do since mankind existed, basically. It was like reading the ashes or the intestines of chickens in the past. But today we have something which is really much better, a much better crystal ball, and that is the World Wide Web. And its most important parts, Facebook, Twitter, and Wikipedia. And if we read what the most active members of this creative swarm on the web are saying, we are in fact able to predict some amazing things, which is what I call the cool hunting. And in order to explain how those creative swarms really work, I would like to first do a very short introduction of 1 minute into social networks. So just as a check, who of you has heard of social network analysis? I'm surprised, it's quite an impressive show of hands. So let me just show you one picture of such a social network, because we are all not single individuals, but for me, my belief is we are the product of our relationships. And measuring those relationships, that's what helps us to, for example, predict what's going to happen tomorrow. And in the past, measuring relationships meant you had to ask, how does Cristobal like you? But now, we can just check how many emails we exchanged, and then we see that automatically. And this network here is a network of jazz musicians. You can really look at any type of network, and you get very similar insights. We are looking at networks on the small group level, just a few people. We are also looking at organizational networks, a few thousand people, mostly communicating by email and phone. And we are looking at the world, global networks. They all work the same. Unfortunately, we are not all equal. Some peaks are more equal than others, as George Orwell says in Animal Farm. And here we have an example of these jazz musicians, where we have 3 jazz musicians who are more important to Julian Laurent, Steve Coleman, Wayne Shorter. And their importance is measured by 2 criteria: numbers of friends and importance of friends. And you can imagine that by a simple example. I was born in a small village in Switzerland. If I had stayed there, and if I went to the soccer club and had played football there every day, I would have 200 friends. But those 200 friends would not really help me to change the world in Santiago de Chile. If, on the other hand, I went to the US and I got friends with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, which by the way I'm not, purely hypothetical example, then that's enough. And in the language of social networks, the first is called your degree, number of friends, and the second one is called betweenness. How much are you between other important people? And just having 2 most important people be your friends is basically enough. And so what we do, we look at those online social networks and we try to predict which ones are the most influential ones, which ones are the most creative ones, and then we assume if what they say is being picked up by enough others, then that is in fact going to happen tomorrow. And those small creative groups, that's what I call the collaborative innovation networks for coins. And I would like to share with you one example from my own work at MIT 20 years ago when I came as a young postdoc. And I was at the Lab for Computer Science in the same group. I was working on TCP/IP and very hardcore techie computer stuff, writing lots of computer code and having problems with my hand because I was typing so much. And then I went to a conference in Texas, an academic conference on hypertext, and I met this gentleman. And perhaps one or the other might know who that fellow is, Tim Berners-Lee. At that time, nobody knew. He came to my booth because I had already then a Macintosh, always Mac fan. I had taken it, was a very big box, to San Antonio, and I was demoing my system. And then there came this man, he's somewhat smaller than me, and asked whether he could put up flyers about his system, which was called the World Wide Web. And nobody had heard of it. In fact, the program committee after the conference had heard about it because he had submitted a paper and it was turned down because they thought this is not something of academic value. And I had a paper, so I had a booth, and he was going to the people with the booth and asked them whether he could put up his flyers. And he was able to recruit a small group of people, postdocs and graduate students, because those work for free. Usually they are paid by the institution and they can do whatever they think is important. And so he got this group of 5 PhD students. I think there was one guy from Helsinki, there was somebody in Texas, Dan Connolly, there was somebody in Japan, and they built the first system. And my boss at that time, David Clark, he was smarter than me. He invited him to come to MIT as a visiting scientist, and I met him again. And Tim did not have an office. He was not considered important enough. He only had a desk in the hallway, and he had one of the oldest and clunkiest computers that the non-surviving entrepreneurs spoke. They spoke with other non-surviving entrepreneurs. But in 1997, they could not know that. So it seems we are feeling and sensing things which we don't even know that we know them. And we did another experiment with those associated patches in a hospital. And we found that the nurses behave differently to patients which recover quickly than to patients which recover slowly. So that means, basically, you can predict, just put those things around the hospital personnel, whether you die or whether you recover very quickly. So, I mean, it's really scary. Now, Christopher, I don't know what's the timing. So, because I have many more examples of our cool hunting, we also predicted presidential elections last time in the US, and it was quite amazing, because if we read the wisdom of the crowd, and that was really the crowd, it was everybody, that works great for elections, because their people do not lie. They say what they are doing, most of the time. We had some exceptions. For example, when we looked at Hillary Clinton, she never ever had a chance against Barack Obama, a very long time back, except one primary election we were wrong too, because that was in New Hampshire. You might remember that scene. She had an event with some women's groups, and she was starting to cry, which is very atypical for Hillary because she's always very reserved. And then the next day, all the women of New Hampshire gave her their vote, and she won. And that already tells you where our method does not work. We can never predict single people. We can only predict large groups of people. And that also means for sports, it doesn't work very well. We cannot predict whether Rafael Nadal or Roger Federer wins. We cannot really predict whether Chile or Switzerland wins in the Soccer World Cup. Unfortunately, it was Chile at that time. although I'm convinced if he would be allowed to have the team to wear those badges, you would figure it out. Because what those badges do is they measure your capabilities as team players. And a great team of mediocre players is much better than a non-existing team of the best players of the world. And that's what those badges can measure extremely well. Nevertheless, when we do election prediction, I post those things on my blog, then I cannot cheat. Because it's very easy to just construct something in retrospective. But here, we actually did the election day cool hunting live in the Swiss Consulate General in Boston. And so that was the prediction we gave when the ballot office closed, and it was absolutely accurate, the popular vote. Now, I have to say that US presidential elections is the easiest vote you can predict, because it's basically 300 million Americans, and that still dominates the internet. Actually, it used to dominate the internet. That's another story. Today, that's not true anymore. Today, you have Malaysian girls and Filipino girls, and there are a lot of them, and they tweet about whether such and such boy loves them or not. And that really messes up our prediction. And then you have Justin Bieber and Lady Gaga, and now we are totally lost. So, but elections, that works. So another thing that we did, which works extremely well, is predicting Oscars and predicting how much money a movie makes at the box office. Why does this work? Because people say, I'm going to see such and such movie, and usually they go. If people say, I'm going to buy such and such stock, you never know. Most likely they will not buy it. They just want to lead you astray. But for movies, it works extremely well. And the swarm in this case, it's actually two. It's IMDb, the movie database, and the forum, and it's Rotten Tomatoes. And there we found another really amazing thing about honest CVs. In that, if, and it doesn't matter whether it's expert or swarm, because Rotten Tomatoes is more expert, if such a person says, I think this is the best movie I have ever seen, I totally love it, the movie will be successful. If the expert says, this is the worst movie I have ever seen, it's total crap, the movie will be successful. If the person says, this is not a bad movie, if you have nothing better to do, you can go and see it, it will be a failure. Or put it in other words, you just need emotions. Whether they are positive emotions or negative emotions doesn't matter so much. It predicts success. And so that's what we did here. And we were able to predict box office success up to 98% accurately. Which means that we have our mathematical model, you throw in all those parameters, and then on the day when the movie comes out, we can predict very accurately how much money 3 weeks later the movie will make, which is something which is quite of interest to movie companies. We also predict, this is just some examples of movie where it works very well. This Snakes on a Plane is a very bad movie, which was totally hyped up. But using our filtering system, it totally fell out. Oscars, we predicted Oscars for Swiss TV. We did that live on TV. And we were right for the best picture and best director. And we were not so right for best actor. Why? Because they have a love life. And that messes up everything. If the people on IMDb start speculating about whether George Clooney finally marries his girlfriend or not, that has nothing to do whether he gets an Oscar or not. So it gets really sometimes quite confusing. So we also predicted Twitter, and when we began 3 years ago using Twitter to predict stocks, we were able to get like 88% accuracy by just mining all of Twitter. But that was before we had the Malaysian girls, and that was before we had Justin Bieber and Lady Gaga. And now we have to apply some tricks. And the first one is, We only look for hope, fear and worry. That's already helps a lot. And it actually turns out, again, it's only about emotions. If people say, I hope it's not as bad as I fear, for example, the Dow Jones goes down, or the Nasdaq. And so, just looking for emotions is already the first trick. Second trick is looking for smileys, because that's another good way to pre-filter. And the third trick, using the right geographic areas to get rid of the Malaysians and the Filipinos, which are so eager tweeters, it's amazing. And then, again, if we throw in the right variables into our regressions, we get quite accurate predictions. And now I usually get the questions, why are you still here? I'm not on the Bahamas or whatever, because you can speculate and make a lot of money. But the point is, it's one thing to do this to write academic papers. And it's another thing to get this to work reliably and do your own fund investing. And now there comes another thing, and that is, if everybody starts doing it, it doesn't work anymore. So we have this feedback loop. So it's a really tricky thing, and there are some, I'm usually invited to present our papers to banks, and it's a safer living to explain my algorithms, and then I let them do and take it and whatever they want. And I just read that there is now the first fund in London, Derwent Capital, who is based on Twitter trading. But the problem really is you need to change your algorithm all the time. For example, these days on Facebook, the most influential people are pretty girls who own horses and have a golden retriever. We did some analysis, and that changes all the time. And so you continuously need to update your prediction system to figure out those sort of things. So let me just conclude with the project we did with those associated badges, which in Germany allowed us to predict what's the personality of the people is. The the black one, that's the older version, and the white ones, that's the most recent ones. Right now we are doing some projects with jazz musicians. We have done projects with call centers. We have done projects with creative teams, where it turns out it's all about trust. And just the way how you behave with each other predicts whether you trust each other. And so I think with that I would like to come to a close and just thank you very much and invite all of you to become collectively more intelligent and members of this world. Thank you.
Questions or comments? You know, there's a lot of people over there. I hope you get to listen. I think we have some mic here.
I want to ask you a very basic question. When you talk about predicting all this network connection, how does your system work? Do you actually have people who go into blogs and they're reading, or how does it basically work?
We do. We build a big database, and chances are you might be in there also. If you are an important blogger and Twitterer, and we try to guess whether, because most people have the same Twitter handle and the same abbreviations in Facebook and in LinkedIn and in the blogs, and we try to measure your importance. And then if we, let's say, search for Pirates in the Caribbean to see how much money the next version of the movie will make on the box office, we will multiply what you say with your social network importance. That's one of the main tricks. And the second one, we try to find your emotion. If you have lots of hope, love, fear, worry words, that again will boost it. So the more important, the more emotional, the more you will influence the crowd.
I wanted to know this machine, this device you are using, is only for research, or you also, I don't know, because it's really interesting, I don't know, for many many things to evaluate, maybe inside in a company to, let's say, what the person that could be the leader or the from the team or things like that, or I don't know, maybe even in football, for example.
I would love to study sports teams, and Daniel Olbin, you might know, and two other colleagues, they just started a startup company. They have finished their PhD at the Media Lab, and the white badges are the commercial ones that they are renting or selling. So we are always trying to eat our own dog foods and be entrepreneurs ourselves and start companies.
And I think we have an opportunity to do a pilot project with the badges in the context of your class at the master.
Yes.
I think we have discussed that, so I think if there's some interest, we can discuss that later for our innovation master and do a pilot with students or companies, whatever.
Yes, absolutely. My big vision is, if you are a fan of Isaac Asimov's psychohistory books, psychohistory. Meaning, what are really the patterns to look forward? And we don't know the waggle dance for humans, the honest signals. And this is fascinating on all three levels, individual, organizational, global, and we have just begun. We don't really know anything yet. Those honest signals, and because in the end that will lead us to collective intelligence, to real collective intelligence. Google, in a sense, is already collective intelligence, because you can read some quite surprising things out of it. But what I'm fascinated with is collective creativity. And since we have the internet, brains can connect so much faster and so much more global, like our coin, from Chile and Korea and China and US and Europe. So lots of things to do. In all levels, understanding this things. There are a few things about, the first one, follow your vision and find your coin, I call it. And then the big thing is sharing the reward from the beginning, and that does not have to be money, because what I found is the motivation. We have the simple framework. We say people are motivated by four things: power, love, glory, money. And money is number 4. And in a startup, if you talk about money on the first day, forget it. It will never work. And if you share the rest in the beginning, if you get a really shared vision, if you have a really open mind, diversity is great. And then you need a very solid dose of stubbornness. Otherwise it will never work.
And I feel like a lot of what you said makes a lot of sense for us. But I wanted to ask you, what would be your advice in order to increase our number of connections and to become more relevant within our networks in order to apply more of what you said in our case?
Well, about how do you choose your network strategically? Because we looked at that in great detail in Germany, startup entrepreneurs, and the sad answer is, the more connections you have, the less successful you are. You waste your time. Except if you strategically place them. So, meaning if you are at the elite institution, which it seems this is sort of one in Chile, the more connections you have, the better you do. And we call that the amount of tribeness. And if you are tribal in, let's say, Harvard, you will win. If you are tribal at the huge public university, it's a waste of time. There it's much better to have fewer connections, but spread them as diverse as possible.
Peter, from your short visit in Chile, how do you see Chile in terms of using our collective intelligence and our collaborative innovation networks? And maybe you can provide a couple of recommendations to continue along the road.
Well, obviously I have a very biased view. It's University Católica and the Friendship Network so far. But I think what I have seen as far as cluster hypothesis goes, because you know that, and that was studied at many places, and you are building these innovation clusters, and I think that's something which works extremely well, which has been shown many times. And now combining that with social network analysis to see how it develops and supporting it, I think that's very promising. And also that you have very open society with lots of connections globally through the internet, because that's the global brain. And if you isolate yourself, that's suicide. But it seems you are very open to that, and so that is very good. Because it's a combination of local and global. You need both of them. And for building trust and transparency, which are two of the key things for those collaborative innovation networks, face-to-face is absolutely key. You can do it long distance, but it takes forever, and it's very hard. I mean, if you have problems to discuss, doing that with email, it does not work very well. And so, the cluster plans that you were telling me, I think that sounds like a perfect thing to do, and then your global network that you are building.
Okay, this has been an amazing talk. It's 8:45, so thank you, Peter, again. Let's give him a round of applause.
He will be back in March for his course at Innovation Master and for additional workshops. So stay tuned with redieuc.cl and with innovación.uc.cl/magister, que se vienen muchas cosas y este programa de Future tiene muchos invitados en lo que viene. Muchas gracias a todos ustedes.